Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona with the March 6th edition of Horses to Watch. This week I'm taking a look back at three races from the past weekend, one from Saturday and two from Sunday. I typically like to take a look at a mix of dirt and turf races, but this week I'm taking a look at three races that all took place on the dirt. The first two that we're going to take a look at are from Gulfstream Park. One was from Saturday, and it was right at the same distance as the Fountain of Youth, which drew a lot of opinions about the pace of that race. And I think it's interesting to compare the 10th race, which we're going to look at, to the Fountain of Youth from a pace perspective and also from the perspective of horses running back out of that race to kind of validate the performance of a horse that ran in the Fountain of Youth. So if we roll the tape from the gate, the horse that I want to focus on is the number 6, Felix the Fox. And you see right at the start, he just breaks about a length and a half to 2 lengths slowly. And we talked about it a lot on the Time Formulas Pacecast this week about the break in these mile and the 16th races as it pertained to a horse like Hidden Scroll having to rush up, and just everything goes wrong for Felix the Fox in the first eighth of a mile, because what you really don't want to have happen in these mile and the 16th races is breaking slowly and then getting shuffled back, because you go right into the turn, horses are coming over on you, and you just ending up farther back in the pack than you otherwise would have. And as they move on to the backstretch, you see the field start to bunch up, and Felix the Fox starts to make an early move towards the outside. Joel Rosario, who's on him, seems to have trouble controlling him, and that might have been due to the fact that Felix the Fox was wearing blinkers for the first time in this race, and he just seemed to be a lot keener than he was in his prior races, kind of tugging Rosario up into the race. And at this point, rather than trying to slot in behind horses, Joel just lets him run all the way up into second place. This is a really difficult move for a horse to make, going 2 turns on the dirt, because he already expended the energy of trying to make up ground at the start, and now he's trying to go faster than all of the horses in the field down the backstretch. If you look at Trackist numbers, Felix the Fox actually put in a pair of consecutive sub-24 quarter miles after the first quarter. He went his second quarter in under 24 and then his third quarter in under 24 seconds. And that's just really hard to do in a route race. It's hard to sustain that momentum. And as they come to the top of the short stretch, you see Felix the Fox is basically spent at this point. He's already used his burst of energy on the backstretch into the far turn, and he just really doesn't have a whole lot left for the stretch drive. All things considered, I thought he stayed on fairly well to be fourth in this race, because he could have totally fallen apart after that kind of trip. And he does run on decently to be fourth behind a trio of horses who all have some quality to them. The top three, as we talked about a lot before the Fountain of Youth, were all finishing behind Hidden Scroll in that January 26th maiden race, and they validated that race. But the only reason that they were able to attain the top 3 spots in this race is because Felix the Fox had such a tough trip. Felix the Fox had proven his quality prior to this in that maiden race at Aqueduct back in December, when he finished behind Kentucky Wildcat, who went on to finish second in the Sam F. Davis, as well as Country House, who went on to be second in the Risen Star a couple weekends ago. So Felix the Fox, we know he's a good horse already. It's taking him a few starts to break his maiden. I think he's going to take a step forward off of this tough trip that he had on Saturday. Moving on to Sunday at Gulfstream Park, there was another dirt race that I want to take a look at, this one going around 1 turn. It's a 7-furlong race, an optional claiming nominaries of 1 allowance race for older horses. And there's a horse in this race coming off a layoff, the number 3 Candygram. And right from the start, we'll see that he breaks a little bit flat-footed. It's not a poor break like Felix the Fox had, but he's going to come out of the gate just a little bit behind the field. So if we roll the tape, you'll see that it's a pretty, it's a 9-horse field, and Candygram, the number 3 horse in the red cap, is just going to break a little bit slowly. He kind of has to rush up from here. And the number 6 horse is a speed type that just got the jump on the entire field. And what's going to happen from here at this point is the speed horses that broke a little bit slowly are going to try to rush up to catch up to the 6, and they're just going to end up going way too fast in this race. If you look at Time from US pace figures, every fraction of this race is color-coded red except the final time. They were just going extremely fast down the backstretch, and this is a race that, if you watch at the end, it completely inverts. The horses that were 9th, 8th, and 7th early in this 9-horse field end up finishing 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So they're going to completely flip-flop positions in this race. And Candygram just kind of gets a tough trip for a horse coming off the layoff, because he has to rush up inside. And then from here, he kind of ends up in a little bit of a pocket behind horses that are going to be tiring. And you see Jose Ortiz is on him, is trying to get him to go, but he's also not sending him so aggressively because there's just nowhere to go in front of him. And Candygram is going to end up in a spot where he's going to have to angle inside of tiring horses at the top of the stretch. And that's just not a position you want to be in when the race is going to fall apart and all of the horses are making outside moves. I'm really a believer in race momentum and races that favor a certain running style, and this is definitely one of those where horses were that were with the flow or moving outside late, and Candygram was trying to close ground inside. It's just not the place you want to be because horses are pack animals, and they're going to run with horses that are moving at the same speed as them. And Candygram is just so far removed from the other horses that were making menacing moves in the stretch. So I think Candygram's published running line is not going to look that appealing. I think he was 7th in this race. He's beaten a few lengths. But the time from US speed figure that he earned was actually one of the highest in the field because he was close to that pace. It was actually a weird race from a time from US speed figure perspective because we award horses who were close to fast paces, and the top 3 finishers actually had the 5th, 6th, and 7th highest speed figures in the field, even though they had the top 3 positions. So I think it's really instructive to look at pace and speed figures for this race. And Candygram is a horse that is going to move forward off this, especially stretching out in distance. When he broke his maiden, he won it in gate to wire fashion, going a route of ground, and I think they're going to stretch him out off this performance, and we'll see some improvement. Finally, we'll move to Oaklawn Park for a race on Sunday. This was a conditioned allowance race for older horses going a mile, which also is a short stretch, kind of like Gulfstream Park, around 2 turns. And I want to focus on the number 2 horse, Pioneer Spirit. And right from the start, we'll see that he's sent pretty hard out of the gate to contest what was a pretty contested pace. It's not color-coded as being fast in time from USPPs, but there were definitely horses creating some separation in the early parts of this race. The number 3 is a long shot in this race, Cake Pop, who's just a naturally fast horse, and he ends up really going hard after Pioneer Spirit, who's more of a front-running type in the early going, and they just separate themselves from the rest of the field in the early going. Pioneer Spirit runs this opening quarter in well under 23 seconds, and creates about a 4-length gap between him and Cake Pop and the rest of the field. And you'll see way at the back of the pack, that's the eventual winner. So you see that a horse who's a good 15 lengths behind the leaders at this point is going to end up winning the race, and that's just indicative of the fact that they were going way too fast up front. I think it's also worth noting that this was a track that had some moisture in it, and that can produce bias situations from time to time. And in time form USPPs, this day was color-coded in light blue, indicating that this was a track that, if anything, was favoring closers. Not to an extreme degree, but closers seem to have an advantage on this card. Coming around the far turn here, you see that horses are ranging up outside of Pioneer Spirit to issue even more challenges now that the early challenger Cake Pop is done. And I think it's worth pointing out that the horses that were closest to him and issuing the first challenges to Pioneer Spirit lost by gargantuan margins. Cake Pop lost this race by 35 lengths. One Liner, who had some backlash coming into this race, the number 4 horse, is going to lose this race by 15 lengths. And the only horse that really battles on that was involved in the pace is Pioneer Spirit. The horses that are running past him here, they have some quality. The number 6 horse is on the lead. That's Warriors Club, who's grade 1 place. He was coming out of the Breeders' Cup Sprint. The 3rd place finisher is a horse who has won over $1 million in his lifetime. So there were some nice horses in this field. And in my opinion, Pioneer Spirit ran the best race of them all because he had the toughest trip and really never gave up in the lane after having to duel through some taxing early fractions. He's a horse that had won a stakes for Brad Cox in the past. It appears that he'd kind of gone off form in recent starts, but I think this race signals that he's still able of putting forth a top effort, and we'll probably see him do much better next time with a more favorable pace scenario. So those are 3 races that I think we can bet horses back out of in the future, and hopefully we'll see them running back soon. So thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you again next week.